Good morning, brothers and sisters. My name is Lance Sorensen, and I'm the Stake Sunday School president, and I'd like to welcome you to this week's edition of our Stake Institute class. And I'd like to express great gratitude for Brother Johansen and all the work he does in preparing for these and in spending the time teaching us. I thought I'd share a quick thought about my experience studying the Doctrine and Covenants over time. I think one of the things that I found kind of jolting about the Doctrine and Covenants in past years was that you could have these sort of soaring theological sections like section 76 where we're learning about, kingdoms and glories and things, and then they could be followed by verses where God says, okay, so-and-so needs to purchase this property and then do this, and it felt like kind of this disconnect. And what I've come to appreciate more this year, especially with Brother Johansen, is that the Doctrine and Covenants teaches us about God who really is involved in the details of our life and is someone who is hands-on and is there to be with us if we ask for his guidance, even in little things, as well as in understanding the great doctrines. And I'm grateful for that kind of insight that Brother Johansen's brought to us this year. I'm going to start with a prayer, and then I'll turn it directly over to Brother Johansen. Our kind Heavenly Father, we're grateful to be gathered to study thy words as we find them in the Scriptures, especially the Doctrine and Covenants this year. We're grateful for the plan of salvation, which we learn about in this book of Scripture. We're grateful to be able to be here on earth and experience the things that we need to that prepare us for a life, an eternal life of joy and happiness. We're grateful again for Brother Johansen. We ask that thou bless him with thy Spirit, and bless us all with thy Spirit to be able to be edified by it and to learn and to grow. And we say this in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.
Thank you, Lance. I hope we all realize that Lance is the one who's running the electronics here, and we appreciate the great work that he does. He comes early, stays late to get all of this organized for us. I hope all of you have received your new Liahona. We got this week. It's a wonderful thing, and I challenge us all to read the Liahona. Why? Well, this month's Liahona emphasizes the temple and temple attendance, and I think what happens to those members of the church who read the Liahona regularly, not only do they get any editorials that might be present, the words from the brethren, but we get a feel for where the church is headed, for what the church is emphasizing. We get a feel for where the doctrines are. And sometimes it might be subliminally that we read these things and it becomes a part of us. And so I would encourage us all to read that magazine so that we can be fortified in these days of tough decisions and things that are happening out there, which is one reason why we're studying the Doctrine and Covenants and doing the Come Follow Me here today. Today we are studying sections 102, 103, 104, and 105. A lot of material in terms of how many scriptures we're actually going to cover today, but some very good things. By way of review, historically, let's just go back a little bit. We know that the church is in two gathering areas. We have Kirtland and we have Independence, Missouri, Jackson County. Of those two, Jackson County was the one that was favored in the sense that was that is the area where the temple was to be built. They received that commandment. That was the first commandment. The first temple to be commanded to be built was in Independence, Missouri, Jackson County. It's Zion. It's where Adam Ondai Amen. It's the gathering. That's a lot of action is going to be happening in Jackson County, and because it is Zion and the gathering, the saints favored going there, and indeed it had 3-4 times the number of members of the church in Jackson County as they did in Kirtland. Joseph Smith lived in Kirtland. So we have these two locales. Both locales are given the commandment to build a temple. The Jackson County boys were given that commandment probably a year and a half before the Kirtland people were, but they didn't do anything about it. And we'll recall last week, the Kirtland people didn't really do anything about it for about 5 months, and they got a little booster shot there saying, we've got to get going on this. And we'll recall that Hiram Smith went out immediately and started to dig the foundation of the temple. None of that happened in Jackson County. They didn't respond to any booster shots or anything like that. And as a result, on July 20th of 1833, they were attacked by a mob of about 400 or 500 mobsters. The printing press was destroyed. The people were tarred and feathered. Bishop Partridge was tarred and feathered. They experienced some terrible things, and then they ended up being forced to sign an agreement saying that they would leave Jackson County by the end of the year. And none of this was known to Joseph Smith at the time that he received the 101st section of the Doctrine and Covenants. But as we read last week, that section surely fit in with a group of people who had this happen to them, the advice that was given and things like this. It fit right in. One of the things that in section 101 that it said, recall last week that we had that parable that kind of explained why the saints were forcibly evicted from Jackson County. And then he said in verse 55, "And the Lord of the vineyard said unto one of his servants, Go and gather together the residue of my servants, and take all the strength of mine house, which are my warriors, my young men, and they that are of middle age, also among all my servants. And go ye straightway unto the land of my vineyard, and redeem my vineyard. For it is mine, I have bought it with money." That is the command. The servant in this case is Joseph Smith. And the event that they're talking about is what we're going to be talking about today. Zion's camp, Israel's army. The section, when we talk of 103, that's kind of the command, in terms of getting everything together for Zion's camp. Before we talk about 103, let's just briefly talk about section 102. 102 is not a revelation. It is minutes of the organization of the first High Council of the Church on February 17th, 1834. Members who were there were several scribes that took the minutes, and they didn't feel like they had it all together, so they gave the minutes to Joseph Smith, and he took them, went home, and through inspiration corrected those minutes and brought them back the next day, and they were accepted by this group of people, which basically was to form a constitution of the High Council. Now, we have high councils today, and this high council was a little different than the high councils that we have today. First of all, the high councils that we have today are stake high councils, 12 men in a stake. This high council was organized, and there were no stakes yet in Kirtland. In just a little while, we're going to get the Kirtland stake, and this Kirtland stake presidency was Joseph Smith and Frederick G. Williams and Sidney Rigdon, Frederick G. Williams. They were the stake, but this High Council was more of a High Council at large. And then the purpose of the High Council was to assist in resolving conflicts. And so Joseph Smith said that he was instituting the law of councils. Before this time, we had bishops' councils, And of course, if someone had and then he said in verse 4, the above named counselors were then asked whether they would accept their appointments according to the law of heaven. They organized this high council according to the law of heaven. We read, Joseph Smith said that Peter had councils, and he had counselors, and the high council here in Kirtland was patterned after what Peter did anciently. They're reviving the rule of the law, well, not the law of councils, but governing by councils. President Ballard has been a real spokesperson for councils. You know, we have Council of the 12, Council of the First Presidency, 70, the Council of, the presidents of the 70. We have high councils, we have family councils, we have ward councils. We run by councils. In other words, nobody is a dictator. Nobody sits around and says, well, this is what we're going to do. A bishop doesn't say that. He has councils. He has brethren and sisters who are there who see things from their own perspective, and they give their advice, they give their admonition, they talk about it, and then they move forward as a council. There is great safety in running an organization by council. We have great corporations who have boards of directors. We could call them councils. And the members of the boards of director, on the board of director, would be very skilled men from other companies. For example, if you're on General Motors board of directors, you may have the president of Xerox or the president of IBM. They're men that are very skilled at understanding economy and where we're going, and they give their advice and give direction for the movement of that company. Well, it's the same thing with the church. There's also that added level here in terms of the high council here, is that they basically, if there is a dispute, they would hold a council. It's changed names throughout the church. Let's see, I think the name now is, they were called high council courts, and then they were called disciplinary councils. Now they're called membership councils. Aren't they? Is that what they're called? High counselor? Yes. Yeah, they're membership councils. I like the way that's evolved, and it's a lot more soft. It's and one of the things they do is if someone has committed sin, an egregious sin, they get together and it's not a trial. The purpose of the council is to bless the life of someone who has perhaps committed a sin. Let's say a person in the church, a Melchizedek priesthood bearer, been through the temple, has committed adultery. That person would probably be asked to go before a membership council. And why? The council is for three reasons. One, to protect other people. What if that person had been preying on members of the church from an economic standpoint, selling real estate in some swampland in Florida or St. George? It's to help. The second thing would be, so the first thing is to protect others in the church from someone who may be a bad apple. The second reason is to help the individual repent, to come back. That's the key. The key is to save this person, to make sure that they get over this problem that they have and can come back into the church. And then the last reason to have a membership council is to protect the integrity of the church. If we have a bad apple, we want to make sure that by not doing anything about it, we don't condone the actions of this individual, but that we take that bad apple and get them together and try to work things out and make sure that people understand we have a bad apple here, but we're working on it, type of a thing. So those are the three reasons why we have them. And then it talks about in here how the disciplinary council would work. Going back to our example of maybe a Melchizedek priesthood bearer who had maybe committed adultery, he would come and they would divide the high council into 6 sides, 6 on this side, 6 on that side. This side would be, I think that the evens speak for the individual, and the odds would speak for the church. And it's not a court of law where we're debating or anything. The people that speak for the individual are there to make sure that there was no insult, no injustice, that we're working on blessing this person's life. And the people that would speak, the odd-numbered people, would speak for the church, making sure that the interests of the church were then represented in the sense that we are protecting the integrity of the church, and we're helping members of the church to realize what's happened here. So it's actually a very wonderful thing. Inasmuch as if a Melchizedek priesthood bearer has committed adultery, he is not going to get forgiveness unless he confesses that sin, and the stake president either works through it with him individually or goes through a membership council. He's not going to come back unless he goes through the process. And they want to make this process just as wonderful and as a blessing to the individual as possible. Pretty good. And so that's basically what we've got here are these notes, these minutes, and they have been accepted. And we have it as an example of what to do in our stakes now to handle things that perhaps people need counsel and advice, and perhaps even they would be relieved of their membership in cases where that would be appropriate. Or they may be put on probation where they're they're still a member, or maybe nothing would happen, or they would just go to counseling with the stake president, whatever. I think we've spent enough time on this in the sense that this is an example. It's a wonderful thing. It's a wonderful precedence that we are following even today. And the church is refining and making sure that it is it's an experience of love, of helping people to fulfill their life in the best way in terms of keeping the commandments. Section 103. This section was given on February 24th, 1834. And it talks about the relief of the lands in Jackson County. Let's start with verse 1. Verily I say unto you, my friends. Now, I forgot to mention that in November of 1833, the saints had not all left Jackson County. As a matter of fact, they were going to go to the courts to receive redress and relief from what had happened to them, which was illegal, what had happened to them. And I think everybody agreed that what the mob did was completely and totally illegal. They went to the courts to get this redress, and that incensed the mob. And so they doubled down, and anybody who was still hanging around, they whipped and beat, and a horrible thing in the middle of November, December, horrible time of year, snow, rain. Many of the people were on the banks of the Missouri River, trying to get across the river to get away from the mob. Across the river was Clay County, and those people were somewhat open to the saints coming across to them and gave them some relief. Parley P. Pratt went over there, and he worked as a day laborer just to earn some money to buy food. And I mean, it was really a very hard time. So here we then have February. And now Joseph Smith realizes that he's going to have to lead a group of people back to Jackson County to see if they can help the saints to regain their lands. So let's read this then. I give unto you a revelation and a commandment that you may know how to act in the discharge of your duties concerning the salvation and redemption of your brethren who have been scattered on the land of Zion. I like the fact that the Lord is emphasizing people over place. They have their property, but how to help the people. What are we going to do to help these people? Being driven and smitten by the hands of mine enemies. I like that. The saints had enemies that were driving them out of Missouri. Those enemies were also God's enemies. Not a good side of the table to be on, but they were God's enemies as well. On whom I will pour out my wrath without measure in mine own time. He's watched, he's seen everything that's happened here. He's going to pour out his wrath. And we are going to read today an account of what happened to Missouri during the Civil War. And it is without measure. For I have suffered them thus far, them meaning the mob, that they might fill up the measure of their iniquities, that their cup might be full. Why did the Lord allow this to happen? Well, one reason is he gives people agency. The mob had agency. And he allowed it to happen because if every time a mob came up to do what they had in their hearts, which is no matter how wrong it is, they had the agency to do it. If he didn't allow them to do it, basically he's taking away their probation, isn't he? He's not allowing them to make a mistake. And so this verse 3 is showing that he allowed this to happen because the mob was doing it, and he had to allow them to fill the cup of indignation, to fill the fullness of their iniquity, so to speak. Now, the second reason why he allowed it is verse 4. And that those who call themselves after my name, meaning the saints, might be chastened for a little season with a sore and grievous chastisement, because they did not hearken altogether unto the precepts and commandments which I gave unto them. So the second reason why is because of the failure of the saints to keep the commandments. Those are the two reasons why the saints are hanging around on the south side of the Missouri River, freezing in a very precarious, terrible situation. And verily, verse 5, verily I say unto you that I have decreed a decree, which my people shall realize, inasmuch as they hearken from this very hour unto the counsel which I, the Lord God, shall give them. Okay, I'm giving you a decree that if you from this moment, from this hour, if you will hearken to my counsel and the counsel which I'm going to give you, behold, they shall, the saints, for I have decreed it, beginning to prevail against mine enemies from this very hour. They shall prevail against their enemies from that very moment, that very hour. What is the Lord giving them? He's giving them another chance. If they will hearken right now, I mean, yep, some bad things have happened to you, but if you will decide right now to hearken to my commandments, then I will give you the power to prevail against your enemies. And he says mine enemies, and they're the same, same enemy. And by hearkening to observe all the words which I, the Lord their God, shall speak unto them, they shall never cease to prevail. Wow. Now, this, they're probably getting this and going, I don't think we realize we're on this bank. We have no money. We have nothing. We're in terrible shape. But they shall never cease to prevail until the kingdoms of the world are subdued under my feet. Okay. But in verse 8, inasmuch as they keep not my commandments, and hearken not to observe all my words, the kingdoms of the world shall prevail against them. For they were set to be a light unto the world, and to be the saviors of men. And inasmuch as they are not the saviors of men, they are as salt that has lost its savor, and is henceforth good for nothing, but to be cast out and trodden under foot of men. We talked a little bit about that. What is salt that's lost its savor? It's contaminated salt. It's no longer pure. It has impurities mixed in with it. You saints, you are called to be a light unto the world. You have the gospel. You have the restored gospel of Jesus Christ. You've been called to have this be a light to everyone else, to bring this joy and happiness that the gospel gives to other people. But if you don't do that, then if you're not the saviors of men, then you're good for nothing. Verily I say unto you, verse 11, I have decreed that your brethren which have been scattered shall return to the lands of their inheritance, and shall build up the waste places of Zion. For after much tribulation, as I have said unto you in former commandments, cometh the blessing. Understatement. He's giving them another chance. Behold, this is the blessing which I have promised after your tribulations and the tribulations of your brethren, your redemption and the redemption of your brethren, even their restoration to the lands to be established, no more to be thrown down. Wow. This is incredible stuff. Verse 14, nevertheless, if they pollute their inheritances, they shall be thrown down, for I will not spare them if they pollute their inheritances. And of course they did pollute their inheritance. They didn't get a second chance. I mean, they had the second chance, but they didn't take advantage of it. Now, we see here a tremendous thing. The Lord calls upon his chosen people. He gives them commandments. He also gives them incredible opportunities for blessings. And to just reiterate last week what we said, we'll recall when the children of Israel were at the base of Mount Sinai, they were to receive the entire gospel, everything, temple ordinances, everything. Yet while Moses was on the mount for 40 days receiving this glorious gospel, he came down, and what were they doing? They were worshiping a golden calf, and they were in debauchery and a tremendous uncleanliness of action. Threw it away. Can't do it. They can't live by it. They lost that opportunity. Then they went, a couple months later, they got to the boundary of Canaan, and the Lord said, hey, go in, land of milk and honey. And they sent 12 spies in, remember? It fits right now, and that's why I'm saying it again. And recall that 10 spies said, whoa, you can't believe, look at all the grapes, the huge grapes, the tremendous, lush land that this is. But we're not going to make it. The people are too strong. We can't win. Caleb and Joshua said, we can do it because the Lord told us to do it. We're going to do it. Let's go in and take care of these people. Well, the children of Israel said, let's not do it. So they were condemned to wander in Sinai for 40 years till everybody who had not had the faith to go in died. They lost the chance. The Lord doesn't fool around. He said, nevertheless, if they pollute their inheritances, they shall be thrown down. For I will not spare them if they pollute their inheritances. Same thing with these people. You have a chance now to have Zion again. But if you pollute your inheritance, boom, that's it. They polluted it, boom, that was it. They ended up, everybody going across the Missouri River into Clay County, and then they formed a Mormon county called Caldwell County. They split in the northern part and that's where Adam und Diamond, and that's where far west, and we'll study about those things coming up. But that's what happened here. They lost this window. Now, brothers and sisters, we need to look at this, and we need to say, hey, if I pollute my inheritance, I'm not going to get what I've been promised. Whatever it is, the Lord's not fooling around. Zion, we will learn that Zion can only be built by a Zion people, by a people who are keeping the celestial law. If we can't keep the celestial law, we will not be able to build Zion. You've got to be worthy. You've got to be right on to even be participating in building Zion. So this isn't just for the saints in Jackson County or Kirtland for that matter. It's for us. We have been promised incredible blessings. And President Nelson has given us some very explicit instructions on how to conduct our lives. And are we doing that? Behold, I say unto you, the redemption of Zion must needs come by power. God's power. The only way this Zion is going to be redeemed basically is through God's power. It's not going to be through the power of man, but God's power. Same thing with us. We're entering into a period of time in the world's history. When I grew up, and I'm probably the oldest man here, I watched Leave It to Beaver. You know, I said that to my institute class, and they didn't even know who Leave It to Beaver was or what it was. Very sad. That's a culturally deprived. My point is that when I grew up, there was a right and a wrong, and was a line. And then when I'm raising my kids, the devil kept trying to move the line, you know, so that you would think you were in the right spot, but you weren't in the right spot because he'd moved the line. Well, what has happened today? There is no line. The devil has completely removed the line of good and evil. We are growing, our children, our grandchildren are growing up in a period of time where it is absolutely there. People in the highest levels of government and churches even are saying there is no right and wrong. Very tough time to be growing up. And so we got to redeem Zion. Zion is our family right now. And it has to come through God's power. We can't do it on our own. We've got to have God's power to redeem it. Therefore, I will raise up unto my people a man who shall lead them like Moses led the children of Israel. For ye are the children of Israel and the seed of Abraham, and ye must needs be led out of bondage by power and with a stretched out arm. As your fathers were led at first, even so shall the redemption of Zion be. That man who will lead the children of Israel to redeem Zion will be the president of the church, whoever that is at the time. And they will redeem Zion. Verse 19, therefore let not your hearts faint. Don't be discouraged. For I say not unto you as I said unto your fathers, mine angel shall go up before you, but not my presence. See, now to the fathers he said, my angels will go with you, but not my presence. The Melchizedek priesthood won't be with you. I won't be with you. But I say unto you, mine angel shall go up before you, and also my presence. And in time ye shall possess the goodly land. You will be able to go forth, and my angels will go before you, but also I will be there. He's distinguishing between the people in ancient and now. I'm going to be with you. Verily, verily, I say unto you that my servant Joseph Smith is the man to whom I have likened the servant to whom the Lord of the vineyard spake in the parable which I have given you. And I read that to you at the beginning, that he's the man that's going to organize this Zion's camp. Verse 22, therefore let my servant Joseph Smith say unto the strength of my house, my young men and middle-aged, gather yourselves together unto the land of Zion, upon the land which I have bought with money, that has been consecrated unto me. And let all the churches send up wise men with their monies and purchase lands, even as I have commanded them. So he's saying, okay, Joseph Smith is going to organize this group of young men and middle-aged men. He's going to organize these people, and you're going to go back and help to redeem Zion. But in the meantime, I want you guys to donate money, because the only way to get Zion is we're going to have to buy the land with money. And let all the churches send up wise men. All these churches are the other branches. The branches in the east, Kirtland, New York, wherever there are branches of the church, they are commanded now to send money to help out to buy Zion. Verse 25, and whomsoever ye curse, I will curse, and ye shall avenge me of mine enemies. And my presence shall be with you, even in avenging and mine enemies unto the third and fourth generation of them that hate me. Well, you know what I think I'm going to do? I'm going to go through the doctrine here. I've been wrestling how to do this. And then I'm going to go through the history afterwards, so that we have a straight timeline of the history. Let no man, verse 27, be afraid to lay down his life for my sake. For whoso layeth down his life for my sake shall find it again. And whoso is not willing to lay down his life for my sake is not my disciple. He's talking now. What has he done? He's asked these people, we're asking for volunteers. We're asking for people to join Zion's camp. We're asking for people to donate money to Zion's camp, to take that money with them and help the saints when they get there, and also to buy land. In verse 30, and it is my will that my servant Parley P. Pratt and my servant Liven White should not return to the land of their brethren until they have obtained companies to go up into the land of Zion. They were the ones charged with doing some recruiting, as well as Hiram Smith. Others were, but these two had the specific responsibility of recruiting people for Zion's camp. By tens, or by 20s, or by 50s, or by 100, until they have obtained to the number of 500 of the strength of my house. I want you to get an army of 500 people. Behold, this is my will. Ask and you receive, but men do not always do my will. Understatement. What is he saying here? He's saying, this is my will, this is my commandment, but people don't always do what I'm asking them to do. Therefore, because people don't always do what they're asked to do, therefore, if you cannot obtain 500, seek diligently that peradventure ye may obtain, seek diligently that you may obtain 300. And if you can't obtain 3, try to get 100. But you shall not go up into the land until you have obtained 100 of the strength of my house. So I want 5. But if you can only get 1, go with 1. But don't go with less than 100. And they go out. And they recruit and recruit. Isn't it interesting that he says, let's go back to verse 27, let no man be afraid to lay down his life for my sake. All of the members of Zion's camp, as you read their journals and the things that they said, they were thinking they were going to go have in a pitched battle with the mob in Missouri. I mean, they had guns and everything else. And many of them thought they were going to die. And that's why the Lord says, don't, if you do die, for my sake, you'll get exaltation. And whosoever is not willing to lay down his life for my sake is not my disciple. Now he's saying that for a reason, because they didn't get 500. Joseph Smith left in May of 1834 with 100, a little over 100. Now he was joined by others, and eventually they had like 211 men and 217 men, 11 women, and 11 children. Not the 500, because people didn't join in. They also didn't get very much money. Now let's go to section 104. A little background on 104. You'll recall that in sections 78 and 82, the church organized the United Firm. It's also called the United Order. He organized one in Missouri and one in Ohio. And the people that belonged to that firm consecrated all of their goods to that firm. The purpose of that firm was, of course, to they like in Missouri, one of the things that was there was the Whitney store. And it was to run at a profit, and the profits of that were to be used to help the poor. Because of the saints in Missouri getting thrown out, obviously that firm, the United Firm in Missouri, was not functioning because their properties had been taken from them. The store had been taken from them. Another thing that had been consecrated was the printing press. They were to earn money on the selling of books and things like this. And so they decided to split the two. And the Lord is then confirming this, that they do this. But it's more than that. And let's get into that. So this is where it says, verse 1, "Verily I say unto you, my friends, I give unto you counsel and a commandment concerning all the properties which belong to the order, which I commanded to be organized and established to be a united order and an everlasting order for the benefit of my church and for the salvation of men until I come. Therefore," verse 4, "inasmuch as some of my servants have not kept the commandment, but have broken the covenant." How did they break the covenant? "Through covetousness and with feigned words." What is feigned words? Pretended words, pretended sincerity. "I have cursed them with a very sore curse and a grievous curse." It didn't work. The United Firm didn't work because people were covetous. And they gave lip service to it, but didn't fulfill it. In verse 6, "For I, the Lord, am not to be mocked in these things. And all this, that the innocent among you may not be condemned." In other words, there were those in the United Firm who weren't covetous, who didn't break their covenants. And he promised them a crown of glory on my right hand. Verse 8, "Therefore, inasmuch as you are found transgressors, you cannot escape my wrath in your lives. Inasmuch as ye are cut off for transgression, ye cannot escape the buffetings of Satan." Now, what they've decided to do is disband these organizations and distribute the property to the members. And so in verse 11 it says, "It is wisdom in me, therefore, a commandment I give unto you, that ye shall organize yourself and appoint every man his stewardship." They're going to distribute these assets. They're going to be stewardships to these people. "And it is expedient that I, the Lord, should make every man accountable as a steward over earthly blessings, which I have made and prepared for my creatures." That's what it's all about, brothers and sisters. The idea of having the means to earn a living, and I am a steward over those means. The means are owned by the Lord. He says that in verse 15 or 14. I, the Lord, stretched out the heavens and built the earth, my very handiwork, and all things are mine. Look, I created everything, and everything is mine. And it is my purpose to provide for my saints, for all things are mine. This whole consecration thing was to provide for everybody, the poor, the rich, but to use the means that are owned by the Lord. But it must needs be done. Let's see, did I read 15? And it is my purpose to provide for my saints, for all things are mine, but it must needs be done in mine own way. And behold, this is the way that I, the Lord, have decreed to provide for my saints, that the poor shall be exalted, in that the rich are made low. We talked about this before. We've talked how the rich and the poor need each other for salvation. The poor need a break. They need to be lifted up. They need to be given the ability to go on their own. It's hard to be worrying about salvation if you're starving, or if you're not living in a house, if you're out in the rain. It's hard to be worried about doctrines. People need to be taken care of. Basics need to be handled. And the rich, they need to use that because that's their way of being able to give of themselves, to lift others, which they have to do in order to gain their salvation. For the earth is full, and there is enough and to spare. There you have it. For all these people who believe in Malthus, how we're going to run out of resources. Not so. The earth is full, and there is enough and to spare. We can support an increasing population. Verse 18. Therefore, if any man shall take of the abundance which I have made, and impart not his portion according to the law of my gospel unto the poor and the needy, he shall, with the wicked, lift up his eyes in hell, being in torment. How many times have we read in the Doctrine and Covenants that we must take care of the poor? We must give of ourselves. He's making it very, very explicit. If we take of the abundance and we don't impart of that abundance to the poor, we will go to hell. I just want to remind us of a very great quote. You thought I didn't have it. So did I. King Benjamin, his great sermon. Mosiah chapter 4, verses 15 and 16 and 26. But ye will teach them to walk in the ways of truth and soberness. Ye will teach them to love one another and to serve one another. This is what we teach. This is what we're here to do. Love one another, serve one another. And also ye yourselves will succor. What does succor mean? To give aid, to lift, to strengthen those that stand in need of succor. Ye will administer of your substance unto him that standeth in need, and ye will not suffer that the beggar putteth up his petition to you in vain, and turn him out to perish. And now for the sake of those things which I have spoken unto you, for the sake of retaining a remission of your sins, for the sake of receiving a forgiveness of sin, pretty big sake here, from day to day, that you receive a constant remission of sins from day to day, that ye may walk guiltless before God. How do we walk guiltless before God? I would that ye should impart of your substance to the poor, every man according to that which he hath. There's no set number as we talk about fast offerings. I mean, if you're making 6 digits and you're giving the value of 2 meals to fast offerings, you're in deep trouble. Because we are to contribute according to what we have. Every man according to that which he hath, such as feeding the hungry, clothing the naked, visiting the sick, administering to their relief, both spiritually, temporally, according to their wants. Everywhere, Book of Mormon, everywhere, we have these great commandments that say that we must take care of the poor. This is the basis of the entire consecration, where I consecrate all I have and I receive back a stewardship, and I am graded on how well I take care of that stewardship. But what is interesting, even though I get the land back in the law of consecration by a deed, and it's deeded to Armand Johansen, or I get the carpenter's tool and they're deeded to me, the land still belongs to God. The carpenter, all of the means. He just said everything is his. He created everything, and everything is his. Therefore, anything we receive as a result of that stewardship, we have a sacred duty to handle wealth according to how the Lord would have us handle it. In other words, if I became a billionaire, I would be amiss if I had the faucets in my kitchen made out of solid gold. It's not mine. The Lord is saying all of the means of production are his, and he's going to give it to us, but we have a stewardship, and we're going to be held accountable for how we handle that stewardship. Well, my goodness. Verse 55 in section 104. And I skipped to that because all this other is the giving of these stewardships. They gave the tannery to Sidney Rigdon because as a young man, his father was a tanner and he learned how to operate a tannery. They gave to Sidney Rigdon farms because Sidney Rigdon was a very good farmer. He was able to make profit on farm. They gave all these things. We don't need to go into those things. Verse 55, behold, all these properties that he just gave out in terms of stewardships are mine. Or else your faith is vain, and ye are found hypocrites, and the covenants which ye have made unto me are broken. And if the properties are mine, then ye are stewards. Otherwise, ye are no stewards. In other words, if I own all of the properties and I give you some of those properties, you're a steward over that property. Make sense? And you're held accountable for the profits you make as a steward over that. Now, just because we're talking about tanneries and farms and things like that, we could just as easily talk about salaries, stocks, whatever. It's all God's. And we have a very sacred responsibility to deal with those things. Verily I say unto you, I have appointed unto them to be stewards over my house. Even stewards indeed. The idea of being a steward is indeed taking care of that. Verse 70, and let not any among you say that it is his own, for it shall not be called his, nor any part of it. You can't call it your own. It's mine. And there shall not any part of it be used or taken. Okay. We are stewards. I think I've, in verse 78, again, I say unto you, pay your debts. And it is my will, and they were in debt. And the irony is that Joseph Smith said, he knew he had to put together Zion's camp, But he said, look, nobody will go on Zion's camp unless I go. And I can't go on Zion's camp until we have solved the debts of the church. And one of the number one debts is they're going to foreclose on the temple property. Got to solve this. Well, the Lord solved it. They baptized John Tanner up in Canada. He came down and gave $2,000 to Joseph Smith. So that it's interesting how in some way Zion's camp depended on how these things were solved. And it is my will that ye shall humble yourselves before me and obtain these blessings by your diligence, your humility, and the prayer of faith. Verse 80, I will soften the hearts of those to whom you are in debt, until I shall send means unto you for your deliverance. Verse 81, and I will soften the hearts of those to whom you are in debt, that it shall be taken away out of their minds to bring affliction upon you. In other words, they won't foreclose. Now, he didn't waft away the debt, but he said, look, I'm going to cause them to not press you on this debt. I have taken out a great deal of debt in my profession. I happen to know that bankers have nuclear-tipped bullets. I mean, they are very capable of creating great affliction upon people. And so for the Lord to say, wow, and I give unto you a promise that you shall be delivered this once out of your bondage. What a great blessing. And he was. Section 105, Revelation to Zion's camp. This was given to the prophet on Fishing River, which is in Missouri. It was not published in the 1835 edition of the D&C. And the reason why it wasn't brought in till Orson Pratt brought it in the 1876 edition. And the reason for that was, in this section, it says, keep getting money and keep buying property in Jackson County. And they didn't want to publish that because of the Missourians reading that going, oh, no, not on my life, over my dead body, type of a thing. Let me just say right now a little bit of history. So Joseph Smith sends out Orson Pratt and Lyman White to go get and recruit people. And they're having trouble. Sends out Hiram Smith up to Michigan, and he gets 17 people. They're having trouble getting people to go on Zion's camp. They're having trouble raising money. They walk 900 miles from Kirtland to Missouri. 900 miles. That's 3 times the distance from this chapel to St. George. So it's down, back, and down. That's a long... And they walked it. Most of the people walked it. And they had bloody feet. They had blisters. They had bad water. George A. Smith said that they came upon some water, and they had to, when they drank the water, they had to keep their teeth clenched, because as they sucked the water, they had to filter out the wrigglies. What are the wrigglies? Tadpoles. Little tiny itty-bitty tadpoles and mosquito larvae. Well, that's kind of a thrill. They had bad food. And they went to Joseph Smith, and they complained about everything to Joseph Smith. Joseph Smith had a dog. And when the dog barked, Sylvester Smith complained about the dog barking. They went to him and complained about everything. And Joseph Smith said, hey, we can't be murmuring. We can't be having all of this discontent. The Lord's going to put a plague on us. And it continued. Joseph Smith, they had bad butter. They had bad moldy bread. They had all of these things. And Joseph Smith said, eat it. You'll be okay. And they ate it. And they were pretty much okay. I'm trying to create the fact that this was a rough, physically thing that they did. But they were with the prophet of God, 724. They received his council. They received it. They came to a hill. They came to a hill, a very strange hill in Ohio. And it didn't look like a normal, natural Mother Nature hill. And so they dug into the hill, and they found the bones of a man and an arrow in the back. And obviously the arrow was what killed this man. And so they went to Joseph Smith and said, hey, what about this man? Joseph Smith prays and finds out that this is a man by the name of Zelph, the Lamanite, who was a righteous Lamanite and had been killed and was buried. I mean, but where, where else would you find those things? I want to go through the doctrine here, and then I want to go backwards and pick up the history where we've left it off. But the thing I want you to understand right now is the saints weren't that diligent in heeding the call for Zion's camp, both financially and in person. Verse 1. Verily, now, wait a minute, June 22nd, we're at the end. They have now gone the entire distance. They're at a river called Fishing River, and across the river is Jackson County. And the mob says, you aren't going to set foot in Jackson County. I mean, you got a couple hundred people coming, and word comes out, and people say, hey, the Mormons are coming to drive you to pay revenge on what you did to them. So they're massing up their group here, and after we're going to talk about the storm that hit and all of those things. After everything hits, Joseph Smith gets section 105, which basically says we're going to disband. Now, maybe I should say this: when Joseph Smith organized this, he had Parley P. Pratt meet with Governor Dunklin of Missouri and say, hey, we've been treated pretty rough. And Governor Dunklin said, you have. He says, I will call up the state militia, and I will use the militia to help escort the saints back onto their property. And if you guys could come up then with a group of men to protect them too, we can work together. Does that sound reasonable? It sounds very reasonable that when the militia is disbanded, you've still got these people to protect these people, the saints, on their property. That was the agreement. That was the premise upon which Joseph Smith went. It was never intended that they were going to go and have this pitched war with the Missourians. That would have never worked. It was to go and in peace go with the governor's militia to help to redeem the saints and to bring them back on their property. And so when they got to Missouri, they sent Parley P. Pratt to go and meet with Governor Dunklin, and Governor Dunklin said, I know that's what I said, but I can't do that. I think it's going to cause too much conflict. We're going to have civil war in this state. And he may have been right, anyway, he reneged. And once he reneged, that changed the entire mission for Zion's camp. Because now they couldn't go in with 200 people and escort the saints back, because now you had all these mobsters that were, they were armed to the teeth. They were in pitched battle at this point. That wouldn't have worked. And so section 103 comes at the end of all of this, okay, in terms of timing. And it basically sends everybody home. Verily, verse 1, verily I say unto you, who have assembled yourselves together, that you may learn my will concerning the redemption of mine afflicted people. Oh, now I'm on section 105. I'm sorry. Yes, section 105. Behold, I say unto you, were it not for the transgressions of my people, speaking concerning the church and not individuals, they might have been redeemed even now. Why did you get thrown out? Because as a church, you did not keep the commandments. There were individuals that kept it. but as a church you did not keep it. And behold, they have not learned to be obedient to the things which I required at their hands, but are full of all manner of evil, and do not impart of their substance, as becometh saints, to the poor and afflicted among them. They did not help the poor. Now let me just read you a quote. I really think that I get contact lenses on that impair my ability to read. This is worth it. If you'll just, I've got it. Could someone sing a song? Okay. Oh, sheesh. It's worth the wait. In contrast to these teachings of imparting your goods, to help the poor, the saints in Missouri would not even care for the sick of Zion's camp. An example of this disobedience occurred shortly before the camp disbanded. At the end of their 1,000-mile journey, the men of Zion's camp stayed temporarily on the land of a brother Burgett. Heber C. Kimball said, "While we were here, the brethren, being in want of some refreshment, Brother Luke Johnson went to Brother Burgett to get a fowl, like a chicken, asking him for one to make a broth for Elder Wilcox and others who were stricken with cholera." So we'll talk about the cholera, but he's got cholera, he's got people with cholera. He goes to the owner of the land and says, "Hey man, can I have a chicken? I got to make some broth for these guys who are sick." Brother Burgett denied him, saying, "In a few days we expect to return back into Jackson County, and I shall want them when I get there." When Brother Johnson returned, he was so angry at Burgett for refusing him, he said, "I have a mind to take my rifle back and shoot his horse." Zion cannot be redeemed save it be by a Zion people. And you saw that. I mean, so when it says here, that they weren't helping the poor, they weren't helping the poor. And are not united, verse 4, according to the union required by the law of the celestial kingdom. There is a law of the celestial kingdom. It says that we must be one. We must be united. We must help each other out. Obviously, Brother Burgett was not one. And Zion cannot be built up unless it is by the principles of the law of the celestial kingdom. Otherwise, I cannot receive her unto myself. And my people must needs be chastened until they learn obedience, if it must needs be by the things which they suffer. They are out. They've been driven out. They've been persecuted because of their transgressions. And the number one transgression they did, they didn't help the poor. And that example I gave you was a pretty good example of not helping the poor, not being one, not being of a celestial mind, of a celestial attitude of helping one another. And so he's saying, my people must be chastened. I speak not concerning those who are appointed to lead, meaning Joseph Smith and others, But I speak concerning my churches abroad. Who are the churches abroad? They are any of the other branches who were asked to contribute clothing and money for the redemption of Zion. There are many who will say, where is their God? Behold, he will deliver them in time of trouble. Otherwise we will not go up unto Zion and will keep our money. What is he saying there? He's saying that people said this. These brethren went to these branches and they said, hey, we're here to collect clothing and money and stuff. And they said, hey, no, we're not going to contribute because God will redeem Zion. And if God doesn't redeem Zion, it won't be redeemed, and so we're not going to contribute the money anyway. They wouldn't contribute. They wouldn't help out. 9, therefore, in consequence of the transgressions of my people, it is expedient in me that my elders should wait for a little season for the redemption of Zion. What does it mean, a little season? It's almost been 200 years, and we still haven't redeemed Zion. So, a little season for the Lord is a big season for us. That they themselves may be prepared, that my people may be taught more perfectly and have experience and know more perfectly concerning their duty and the things which I require at their hands. We're not redeeming Zion because they weren't, because of transgression, and now they need to be taught more perfectly concerning these things. And this cannot be brought to pass until mine elders are endowed with power from on high. What does it mean, endow? We're going to read endow 3 times here. It's not the endowment. It's the endowment that happened at the Kirtland temple dedication when Moses, Elias, and Elijah came and restored the keys. And also there was a spiritual endowment that occurred for all the saints at that time. To bless, it was a huge endowment, but it wasn't the endowment that we get in the temple. Does that make sense? I need a little response here. Okay. For behold, I have prepared a great endowment, and blessings to be poured out upon them, insomuch as they are faithful and continue in humility before me. That's the dedication of the Kirtland temple. They saw angels. It was an incredible endowment, not to mention the keys that were restored at that time. Therefore it is expedient in me that mine elders should wait for a little season for the redemption of Zion. And then in verse 14, I will fight. Well, let me read the whole thing. For behold, I do not require at their hands, Zion's camp, to fight the battles of Zion. For as I said in former commandment, even so I will fulfill. I will fight your battles. I'm not requiring of you people to fight. I'll fight your battle. Behold, the destroyer I have sent forth to destroy and lay waste mine enemies. And not many years hence they shall not be left to pollute mine heritage and to blaspheme my name upon the lands which I have consecrated for the gathering together of my saints. Wow. When it says that the Lord will fight your battles, let me read this part of history. While the members of Zion's camp marched near to Jackson County, the mob element there met to propose means of stopping them from entering into the county. The prophet Joseph Smith recorded several instances in which the power of the Lord was manifest. The Jackson mob, with Samuel C. Owens and James Campbell at their head, started for independence, Jackson County, to raise an army sufficient to meet me, meaning Joseph Smith, before I could get into Clay County. Campbell swore, this is the leader of the mob, Campbell swore as he adjusted his pistols in his holsters, the eagles and the turkey buzzards shall eat my flesh if I do not fix Joe Smith and his army, so that their skins will not hold shucks. This group of mobsters, about 15 of them, they went to the ferry and undertook to cross the Missouri River after dusk. And the angel of God saw fit to sink that boat about the middle of the river. And 7 out of 12 that attempted to cross were drowned. Thus suddenly and justly went they to their own place. This is Joseph Smith writing. I love it. Campbell, the guy who swore, buzzers, was among the missing. He floated down the river some 4 or 5 miles and lodged upon a pile of driftwood where the eagles and buzzards and ravens, crows and wild animals ate his flesh from his bones to fulfill his own words, and left him a horrible example of God's vengeance. He was discovered about 3 weeks by one Mr. Pirtle. Be careful. Now there were 500 mobsters on the other side of the river, fishing, what was this river called? Fishing River? Fishing River. They are going to attack. There's a group of 5 men that make it across the river, and they have trouble getting the boat back over the river to pick up everybody else. And these 5 men were in our camp. These 5 men went in. So the saints are camped here, and these 5 mobsters who made it across the river come in, and they are swearing vengeance. The wind, and when these 5 men were in our camp, swearing vengeance, the wind, thunder, and rising cloud indicated an approaching storm. And in a short time after they left, the rain and hail began to fall. So these 5 men came and said, we're going to wipe you guys out. We got 500 men on the other side of the river. We're going to wipe you guys out tonight. They go back, and after the storm starts, tremendous wind and rain, hail and thunder met them in great wrath, and soon softened their direful courage, and frustrated all their designs to kill Joe Smith and his army. To join having experienced a pitiless pelting of the storm all night, and as soon as arrangements could be made, drop here. Very little hail fell in our camp, but from a half mile to a mile around, the stones or lumps of ice cut down the crops of corn, the vegetation generally, even cutting limbs from trees, while the trees themselves were twisted in by the wind. The lightning flashed incessantly, which caused it to be so light in our camp through the night that we could discern the most minute objects. And the roaring of thunder was tremendous. The earth trembled and quaked. The rain fell in torrents and united, and seemed as if the mandate of vengeance had gone forth from the God of battles to protect his servants from the destruction of their enemies. For the hail fell on them and not on us, and we suffered no harm except the blowing down of some of our tents and getting wet, while our enemies had made holes in their the hail had made holes in their hats, and otherwise received damage under the breaking of their rifle stocks and the fleeing of their horses. Many of my little band sheltered in an old meeting house through this night, and in the morning the water in Fishing River was about 40 feet deep, where the previous evening it was no more than to our ankles. And our enemies swore that the water rose 30 feet in 30 minutes in the little Fishing River. They reported that one of their men was killed by lightning, and another had his hand torn off by the horse drawing his hand between the logs of a corn crib. They declared that if this was the way God fought for the Mormons, they might as well go home. I say that because of this thing where it says in verse 14, I'm not requiring you guys to fight. I will fight your battles. Well, very quickly, Joseph Smith had counseled them to not have contention, and if there was contention, there would be a plague, and the plague was cholera. It attacked them. It attacked like 68 people, including the prophet Joseph Smith, suffered from cholera. 13 members of the camp and 2 Latter-day Saints living in Clay County died because there was contention. I don't have time to read all the quotes I had for you, because I also... but Joseph Smith gets this revelation. He sends everybody home. You need to understand that this is in June of 1834. In February of 1835, February the 14th, the Quorum of the 12 was organized. And the Quorum of 70 was organized. 9 out of the 12 members of the Quorum of the 12 participated in Zion's camp. 63 of the 70 members of the Quorum of the 70 participated in Zion's camp. Joseph Young, in his History of the Organization of the 70s, recorded this talk delivered by Joseph Smith. In an address assembled in Kirtland soon after the Quorum of the 12 and the 70s were organized. Brethren, some of you are angry with me because you did not fight in Missouri. But let me tell you, God did not want you to fight. He could not organize his kingdom with 12 men to open the gospel door in the nations of the earth, and with the 70 men under their direction to follow in their tracks, unless he took from them a body of men who had offered their lives and who had made as great a sacrifice as did Abraham. Now the Lord has got his 12 and his 70, and there will be other quorums of the 70s called, who will make the sacrifice, and those who have not made their sacrifice and their offerings now will make them. This was a training ground from this enormous adventure. The Quorum of the 12 was called, and the Quorum of the 70, leaders of the church who were tried in this furnace of affliction. And they needed that to happen. So even though, Joseph went with the idea of redeeming Zion, working with Governor Dunkling's militia, the other part of this was that this had a very positive effect in the sense that those who participated in it were refined. Brigham Young said it was, Wilford Woodruff, Heber C. Kimball, they were all on it. They said it was fabulous to be with Joseph Smith and to receive the training and stuff that they had received. Well, in closing, may I just read what happened to Missouri. So it was these western counties, this is the western counties of Missouri during the Civil War, became a seething hell that produced the bloodiest men in our nation's history. Brawls, brutal whippings, shootings, lynchings became daily occurrences. These men drove from the borders of their state those opposed to slavery. The outbreak of the Civil War in Missouri gave the Kansas City Jayhawks the chance of their lifetime, not only to divide the Missourians, but they would now be able to steal horses, plunder farms, liberate the slaves in the name of the Union. Thus the state of Missouri became the devil's host, as the bitter hostility between the Unionists and the secessionists were overshadowed by guerrilla warfare fought on the principle of one must kill or be killed. Thomas Ewing of the Union Army issued his famous General Order Number 11, announcing that everyone living in Jackson County, Cass and Bass counties, was to leave their homes by 9th of September. The next 2 weeks witnessed a mass exodus from the border counties. Only a few families were permitted to stay. Thousands loaded their household goods onto wagons, gathered what stock they could with them, and either crossed into northern Missouri or began trucking southward. A Unionist said that poor people, widows, children, who with little bundles of clothing, crossing the river to be subsisted by the charities of people amongst those who might find shelter. Does that sound familiar to what happened to the saints? Another reported that women, barefooted and shivering in the cold, were driving oxen, riding upon miserable, broken-down horses without saddles. Most of the soldiers enforcing the order were vengeance-minded Kansans, who welcomed such a splendid opportunity to punish the Missourians. In addition, gangs of redlegs swarmed into the depopulated area, looting, burning, and murdering indiscriminately. Of all the United States of America in the Civil War, the county that suffered the most, including the North and the South, was Jackson County. Vengeance is mine, saith the Lord. Well, I hope we take from these wonderful sections the idea that God calls us to great blessings, but we must keep his commandments. May we observe, may we do everything we can. May we read the Liahona, may we read the scriptures, may we do everything we can so that we have the mind and the will of the Lord in our own lives, that we may think as Christ would think, speak as he would speak, and do as he would do, is my prayer in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen. Sorry it took so long.